Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Leger, and welcome to this month's Uplift webinar. Today, I'm joined with Bryant, the founder of Reframe, where he works with founders and executives through high-pressure seasons of growth and transition without burning out. At Uplift, we're creating a world where every workspace is a thriving environment by equipping leaders and employees with tools like mental health first aid to recognize and respond to mental health challenges in the workplace. Today, we'll be digging deeper into stress and burnout in the workplace and what leaders can do to better support their teams and themselves. Bryant, we're so glad you're here today.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Melissa.
So before we get started, we like to get started with an interesting fact with our speakers. So for you, you have been in silence for 10 days. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, that silence in 10 days, that is a big inspiration for the work that I actually do now. It started off with just understanding meditation, and I wanted to take it to a different level just out of curiosity. And I was dealing with a lot at one point in my life, and I started to go on Vipassana retreats. I make an attempt to go each year, and I found that that silence just gives you a chance to reset. Not having that access to technology, writing, speaking, you're able to find those answers that you're looking for. And I was able to see that I was burnt out and I needed to take better care of myself through those 10 days in silence. So I'm making an effort to do it every year.
Yeah, that's definitely a good time. I've done it myself. The longest I've done is 7 days. So that, and usually by that seventh day, I'm like, wow, this is a lot. So you really go for it with those 10 days.
Yes, for sure. Do the work.
All right, Bryant, at the start of each webinar, we like to start with a big question as opposed to just some of those generic icebreakers.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, what life lesson do you wish everyone was taught in school?
Um, Find something that you like and just go deep on it. And what I mean by that is, I think that for the most part, school basically teaches you to follow a playbook that's been written by somebody else and might not necessarily be for you. And what I found and what I started to observe a lot more in my own career is that, I just had an interest in coaching very early on. And I just went deep on it and I did all the different types of coaching. And it's led me to a lot of different opportunities. I've been able to build a life for myself. I've been able to be in places that I never thought that I would be, speak to crowds that I would never think that I would speak to because I just went deep on it. And I picked something I just genuinely enjoyed. And I think it's that simple because I think that once you're really good at something or you really develop a skill or a certain competency in a certain area or interest that you have, I think you're able to expand from there. You're able to take that skill and use it for a multitude of different things, which is what I've done. So just pick one thing that you like and go really, really deep on it and just see where it leads you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you mentioned, we're given this playbook in school.
Mhm.
We think we have to follow it. And I think for so many people, they stick with that playbook because they don't think about like, hey, there might be some other options outside of this one playbook that we're given, which, it could be a good playbook for a lot of people, but for others, they might need to create their own.
Yes, for sure. I think that's the name of the game. Create your own version of success.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you work a lot with tech companies and startups where stress and burnout are hot topics right now. But before we dive deeper, I do want to pause with some of the basics because oftentimes those two words, stress and burnout, are used interchangeably, but they're actually very different. So can you explain the difference between the two of those and why that matters?
Yes, this was a big lesson for myself and just my growth and development. I so stress is something that I have come to find that it's something that I've always we all have, like, we all have different levels of stress. There's different types of stress, eustress, de-stress, and just that just being able to understand that stress is something that actually helps protect us. A lot of times it's a form of protection when it comes to change, uncertainty, when we need to focus. It helps us actually take immediate action. When we're living in that place of distress, that's where we start to maybe feel overwhelmed or those feelings of overwhelm start to come up. And then we have that place of just chronic stress to where we're always just feeling stressed or worried, or maybe that's where anxiety might also creep in as well. So just understanding that stress is just a part of life. It is something that is good for us, but when it's not managed or controlled or regulated, it can become really, really bad for a lot of us, but it's something that we'll always have. Burnout was something that I became a lot more familiar with because I found myself becoming disengaged with stuff that I really enjoyed. Um, Burnout for me was when I stopped actually enjoying coaching for a while. I became less motivated by it. I used to get so much energy from it, and I realized like I just don't want to do this anymore. And then everything else in my life that used to bring me a lot of joy, whether it's drawing or music, I just started to disengage with it, and I was just always tired. I was always just this. It was just this mental fog away from me. So to put it simply, I've come to understand that stress is just this over engagement with something, and it can cause you to just be over engaged. And burnout is more of something that you just become disengaged with something. There's a lack of motivation. And so that's how I've been able to understand it through my own experience and understanding stress and burnout.
Yeah, and I like how you call out the different kind of versions of stress because, too much stress obviously isn't good, but there's kind of like these different levels of stress that you have to look at. Like, is this the one that's protecting me, or is this, is this good for now? It's actually helping me grow, or is this too much stress? So
Mm-hmm.
it seems like there's a lot more analysis with stress, and it could be positive, it could be negative, but there's a little bit more just dissecting there. Where
Yeah.
it's like with burnout, it's like that ain't good for anybody. Like
Yeah.
I haven't met anyone who's like, yeah, the burnout was really good outside of once they came out from the other end. But the actual process of burnout, it's like, no, there's no real good version of burnout.
Yeah, and it's no way you can manage burnout. When you're burnt out, you're burnt out. Like that's what it is, and that's what I've noticed with my clients a lot more. Like they just throw around burnout. I'm just like, I don't know if that's burnout because you showed up here, so you're motivated to do something. So I've noticed that the word burnout is it's thrown out a lot more when it just might be a lot of maybe chronic stress or de-stress that a person might be in distress.
I'm curious. I've gone through the same thing too. I was doing something I loved, and then eventually I burned out from it. I didn't want to show up to work anymore. I thought I built this life where I was going to do everything I
Mhm.
wanted to do all the time, and then that kind of disengagement happened. I'm curious what led you to overcome that burnout.
I think the first thing was just acknowledging that it was burnout. That is the first thing. I had to feel all the emotions that kind of came with it. I was very avoided to actually saying that, hey, I'm burnt out, or actually understanding what burnout felt like. Because it's one thing to just conceptualize it. And I think we spend a lot of time thinking, we have all this data, like thinking, but to just kind of feel the emotion of just that I'm tired all the time. You start to look at yourself a little bit different. You see the tiredness in your face. You may be a little bit drained. Like everybody starts to tell you, like, are you, everybody, and even during this time, people were asking me, like, you seem really tired. Are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. Everything's good. Also, I lost a little bit of hair too. Like I had a patch in my head for a while, and I was just like, "Why am I losing hair? I'm fine." Like, why? Why am I? It was just a lot of these signs and signals that I was just ignoring. Like everything was okay. So the first thing was just to acknowledge that, hey, I might be burnt out. And then from there, what I did was I started to try to get back to the things that actually just brought a little bit more levity. So I changed up my environment. When I was experiencing the burnout, I decided to go back to a place in which, how do I explain it? I experienced a lot of growth. I experienced a lot of community in. So a couple summers ago, I spent the summer in New York when I was going through this burnout. And New York is a central place of community for me. It's where I experienced a lot of growth. I went through a lot there too. Like it's really like where I became an adult, I feel like, because it's New York City and I was poor when I moved there. But I was able to kind of recreate my environment in a way to where I had these variables such as community, I had exercise, I had recreation, I had all my hobbies, I had networking, I had all these different variables here that were within my control that brought me growth and brought me levity a couple years before. I was able to put those things back in place, but just that environment, even though New York can be a stressful environment, I experienced a lot of growth there. So I was able to start to just have awareness around my environment and kind of put those variables back in place in order to get out of that burnout. I know everybody doesn't have the option to do that, but I would say environment plays a big role. in actually getting out of burnout, because sometimes you just need to change everything up, which forces you to take action. So after you feel the emotion, you just don't sit there in the same place all day. I just changed my complete environment.
I love how you even called out that you were in New York and there was stress there, but you
Mm-hmm.
were still able to overcome that burnout with some of that stress of, I just can't imagine how much I'm in Chicago, which I think, that's a pretty busy city, but like
Mm-hmm.
Chicago or New York for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how they do it there because that's a lot.
Yeah. It's motive. It was actually you stress that came up because I knew how to navigate the city because I lived there for 4 years. And just really that community, that's where my core community is at. And I think when it comes to burnout, that connection with community is so important because I think that you feel like it's kind of a lonely journey and you might feel some isolation as well because, like I said, burnout is a part you become disengaged, so you start to maybe isolate yourself a little bit more. So just understanding you got to get back to those pillars that you feel are community and just putting yourself out there a lot more. I think that helps you move through burnout a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having those outside ways to support you, whether it's just recreation, whether it's interaction, or just even some of that emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am curious, Bryant, in your work, you see a lot of hustle and grind cultures, surprisingly still out there. I thought we'd be overcoming this by now, but sometimes it just seems like it's getting worse. How do you see this hustle and grind culture affecting leaders and company cultures?
Um, it, it, I've just seen, I just saw it this week. Um, what I've seen with my clients, I've been able to, I'm working with a VP and a director right now. And what I see is that they are really fixated on, or how they've gotten to where they're at, is that they've been graded on just their output. That's how they've been able to get their promotions, right? Grind hard, stay up late, keep pushing no matter what. And what I see the challenge is that they they don't know how to let go and let other people kind of do their jobs. And what I mean by that is that they're stepping in for people when they aren't performing, or they just do the task for them for one of their direct reports when they might not know how to do the task completely, or out of worry that they might not do it correctly or the way that they would do it. So I think that is a symptom of hustle culture because I think what I've seen is that usually we get rewarded for just output, not necessarily leadership. Like you're able to do a task really, really well. You're really, really good at doing your job. When leadership is letting other people or showing other people or providing a platform for other people to do their job really well and grow. So hustle culture is changing because I think we're going to talk about this probably later, but AI, you don't need to hustle as much. So like your output doesn't really care. Like it's not really about your output. Like it's productivity. That's nothing. It's about the stuff that we call that's a little bit more squishy. So the soft skills, the ability to lead people, the ability to advocate for somebody, the ability to have a difficult conversation. I think that's where that's where we've always been, but I think that there's more emphasis on how do we actually move from a place of just this hustle, like I'm graded on my output, I'm graded on like how I reach my OKRs or KPIs versus how am I helping my team as a collective move forward? How am I supplementing strengths? How am I making sure that people have the opportunity to lean into their strengths? How do I identify those weaknesses? How do I have conversations about those weaknesses? How do I fill those gaps? So it's less about the leader and their output and more so about the direct report and how they're moving as a collective with the team. So I think that's where I've seen the shift at, and that's what I've seen the biggest challenges when it comes to leadership. It's just that hustle culture is really ingrained in output, not necessarily leadership.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that too. Like they got to their roles because they work nights and weekends and they were hustling all the time. And now not only are they kind of stepping in and not supporting the employees and their own growth, but they're also modeling, again, more hustle culture,
Yeah.
which we know doesn't necessarily always produce the best results or outcome either.
The interesting thing there is that when I've seen coach like leaders, or when I've seen leaders that just know how to let go and let people just kind of do their job or let their direct reports make mistakes, they don't get celebrated. That's the interesting part about all of this. Like the more coach like leaders, like, hey, like I trust you, you can do this, they don't get celebrated. It is still the hustle. I work on the weekends. I do my direct reports job for them when they don't do it the way that I want them to do it. They still get rewarded. But I think that's shifting at this point because it's not about productivity. Like we have tools, we have systems in place, we have AI here that's going to help us be more productive. It seems like the people component has no, you have no choice but to grow as a person, as a leader, and making sure you understand people, be more empathetic. And EQ is just something that's so important today because it's really just not about your output anymore. We've seen it. You can do it. You can produce. We get it. But it's about the people now.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is true. A lot of that hustle is celebrated, but it's almost like if you see a team where it's like they all go home at 4:30, 5 o'clock, they get their work done. There's no major challenges because they're actually running really well. It
Mhm.
seems like it's almost like too easy. Like it's too easy. So they must not be having the same type of outcome or performance because they're not working all the time.
Yes, that has been interesting to see in my work. Like, why don't we champion the leaders that just know how to lead? Like, it's so interesting. The teams love them. Teams love them. Give them all the great feedback, but it's just leadership isn't like we want to put a spotlight on this person for just being a great leader. Like their attrition rate might be high on their team, but not because their direct reports don't enjoy working for them. It's just that they are encouraging them, like, hey, why don't you consider another role within the organization? Or hey, like if you got to go, you got to go. Or I've taken you as far as I can take you. If you got to go, you got to go. It's just that isn't talked about enough.
Yeah, yeah. And we can have a
Yeah,
whole nother thing of that of how leaders support other leaders.
yeah, for sure.
You mentioned AI a little bit. And I feel like ever since COVID, there's just been a lot of workplace stressors. First, there was, obviously COVID, which created a lot of uncertainty. And it seemed like we were almost out of all that uncertainty. And now there's like AI, there's government policies, I mean, we can see on LinkedIn, like I feel like half of my connections are open to work these days because of the amount of layoffs off there. How do you think this impact on these external factors have been affecting employees, but specifically leaders in relation to their stress and burnout?
It's that whole saying of teams are a lot smaller now. So it's more pressure on leaders to get more done with less. And I think this is where the squishy work, or what we like to call the squishy work, kind of starts, like really understanding a person and where they're at right now. um i think that I think what I've seen is that when it comes to a leader and managing stress and burnout as it relates to this change or this uncertainty that we're going through right now, what I've seen is that it's like a, how would I frame it? I would say it's like an identity shift that they're going through right now. And what I mean by that is it's just like, okay, I have to kind of find a new way of being as a leader. And that means I have to realize some things about myself as far as just, why do I, for example, it's a manager that feels like she needs to take personal responsibility for the faults of everybody on their team. And that's causing her a lot of stress. That's causing her a lot of anxiety around the work that she does. So it's like a shift in, like, why am I taking responsibility, or why do I feel like I need to carry the bulk of this responsibility of my team's emotions or failures on my shoulders alone? And so what this shift in with AI is actually bringing in is that there has to be more of an intimate relationship that I think leaders and direct reports have to have. And it's not to say that I need to be all in your business, but it's more so about how do I cultivate relationships with my teammates in a more effective way. But the first thing that needs to happen is understanding what is my relationship to work as a leader? Like, am I modeling the necessary behaviors as far as whether it's, we could talk about self-care. We could talk about being off at a certain time. We could talk about expectation setting. We could talk about how we communicate as a team. Like the small things that we just kind of skip over before we actually get, and then skip over to the work, as far as just like, team charters, right? Understanding the values within a team and understanding how these values not only impact the work that you do, but also your personal life as well. Being able to have more coach-like conversations with yourself as a leader, but also with your team. So basically, what I see is that with AI, and this may sound cliche, you probably heard it before, but I think it just forces you to be a little bit more human because teams are a lot more connected now because you have all these tools to get the work done. But it's about how are we using these tools as a partner? And that means that you need to really understand yourself as a manager. Where are your faults? What are the things that you have challenges with, but also what are your strengths? And the same for your teammates, and see how technology can kind of can be a partner as you all are growing or working towards a goal. So I think overall, it is really just first with the manager understanding their relationship to work, their definition of leadership, how they want to lead. And then from there, getting the understanding of their teammates, their relationship to work, their aspirations in their roles. And then from there, not skipping over communication, not skipping over how does this person best receive feedback? How am I going to collect all the data that I need in order to give this person the most effective feedback? What are our norms as a team? How do I protect my team? Right. These things are especially important because I think that just more technology is only going to make things more complicated unless you have a more intimate understanding of your team and how you function as a leader.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting with the technology because it's supposed to be making things easier for us. Mm-hmm. And ideally more time for us, but it almost seems like the opposite is happening. It seems like it's making things more challenging for a lot of people. There's more uncertainty. So, really diving into some of those soft skills to help leverage that technology in a positive way.
Yeah. Just to add to that, like I think before AI, the saying always was like the technology is only good as the process that was established before it, right? And AI is no different. It's just we have to have a process without technology. If that's working effectively, then technology is only additive to this process we already have established. But if the process is terrible, then of course, adding technology to it only makes things more complicated.
Yeah, you just have bad processes now in the little machine telling you what to do. I know it's more complicated than that, but just to kind of keep it simple.
Yeah.
I love how you mentioned though some of those other skill sets. And I know for me, I think it depends on what sort of organization that you're in. I've been in some organizations where training for leaders is very robust, especially in larger companies. I've been with other companies where there's no training at all. I've been in some companies where it's like, hey, here's your 30-minute or your 1-hour training as a manager, and we'll give you like 3 or 4 of these a year. If that, please try to make it. I am curious for the people in organizations who don't have that ongoing training and support. If you're a leader, how do you keep some of those skill sets going that you've either learned very briefly or haven't learned at all? How do you keep that going when you might not always have the organizational support?
I think there's a level of well, first, make sure you go through all the different channels to try to get the education budget, understand what budget is available if you need to go outside the organization. I think that's the first thing after those trainings. The second thing is just understanding that my philosophy is that leadership isn't just a job. It's also just the way it's self-leadership as well. And I think you need a certain level of curiosity about yourself in order to continue to develop yourself outside of work in order to feel that impact within work. So I think for myself and what I've seen work really well when it comes to finding other ways of supporting yourself as a leader is that I'm always encouraging leaders to join boards, right? As you grow in your career, a board is a way for you to exercise leadership in a little bit of a different way, whether it's a nonprofit board, whether it's a board of, I don't know, the school council, whatever it is, like just being able to exercise that muscle of leadership outside of work as well, because those same skills that you need in order to be on that board, it's also relevant to probably the work that you do as well, and having those conversations, strategic conversation, and also seeing what you actually bring to the picture, why people value your opinion. Right. And then from there, I would say the other thing is get involved with incubators. Like since I've worked with VPs, directors, they have a wealth of knowledge and experience in the tech space. And I think what happens is that they think that information is just good for their organization. And I think that just volunteering your time or finding ways to work with incubators, whether they be for profit or nonprofit, is a great way for you to exercise that leadership muscle as well, because you're learning about technology on the horizon, but you're also getting a chance to understand how to advise people, how to mentor people, how to really understand like how to solve a problem. It gives you a chance to still be a doer a little bit, but it's not your organization. Like you're advising these tech companies, and they're not necessarily gonna they want your advice, but you just have to learn how to let go and just say like they might take it, they might not, and that's okay. The other thing I think is, and something that I do, is working with small businesses without technology. The thing about that is when it comes to working in tech, it's a privileged space to be in. You have access to so much information, and small businesses, they are always late on this information or don't have a lot of understanding of how these things work. And I've found that when you just can simply go to a small business, whether it's a coffee shop, it's a restaurant, um, what else? It's a nonprofit organization, whatever it might be, and just present your expertise, right? And just being able to say, I just want to help. I want to volunteer. Start off by volunteering your time. If it turns into something paid, great. But just being able to volunteer your time there, you're expanding your network, but you're also being able to kind of showcase your skill set in a different way, and that directly impacts the work that you do, because it also gets at one of my favorite topics of a sense of purpose. Like you have a bigger sense of purpose outside of the work that you do. So it's not just about the manager training. Let me go through this formal training that my company is making me go through, but I have all these different variables that are in my control outside of work. So I have a bigger sense of purpose, but I'm also adding value to myself, but also other communities outside of the work that I do. That is my philosophy when it comes to self leadership within an organization, but also just self leadership as well, because work is a small part of our identity, but it's not everything. And what we do and I think the goal for most people, not all people, is that there has to be some integration there. So I think if you're feeding yourself outside of work, it directly impacts how you show up as a leader within the work that you do.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, I think there's a lot more creativity that you
Mhm.
can have outside of like the leadership skills that you have at work. And there's that chance to maybe experiment and play.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
and I think there's also sometimes when you go to a company, you kind of get like molded into their speak and kind of
Yep.
the way they want you to be. And those outside sources might give you some of that chance to practice and to show up more authentically, and then maybe
Mhm.
bringing that into your workplace and feeling more confident about
Uh,
showing up as yourself versus like what you kind of think that the mold
mhm.
your, the leaders that you happen to see in the meeting.
Mhm. And you'll be surprised like how much it benefits the people that you lead, because you're doing so much work outside. You have such a different perspective. Like at night, because a lot of companies will spend months, years on the same problem. And because you're exposed to all these different things and just what's on the horizon or sitting on a board, you have such a different perspective, and that just helps you. It's a perspective expander, but you're also seen for being a strategic partner and not just somebody that's about output. Like it's just like, how we consider this? And sometimes that's enough. Right. And then that's what gets me excited, like just in self-leadership and leadership. But that's where I've seen other leaders that I've worked with, when they've invested in themselves outside of work, going past the training or complaining about the training that they get at work. That's what I've seen them do. And I've seen them just be able to have a whole different perspective and whole different relationship with the work that they do.
Yeah, the work that they do, but also like the a different relationship with themselves
Yeah.
too, right? Like
Yeah.
you're saying, I'm more than just this job. I have all these other things in my life
Mm-hmm.
other than than this job.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to touch a little bit, going back just a little bit, touching in on burnout. Um, so for leaders, burnout can really take a big toll. And I know for me, in addition to all the other things that I think a leader should be doing, like the vision, the mentorship, the coaching, all of those things, the kind of day to day,
Mm-hmm.
I always felt as a leader that one of the crucial attributes was kind of being an umbrella for your team in terms of whatever's happening in the company that's not necessarily related to you, that you're kind of providing that cover for your team so they can do their best work. I think the challenge is, especially depending on the industry you're in or the environment that we're in, or even just the leadership within your organization. Sometimes that burnout can come from you're acting as an umbrella and it just constantly keeps raining. Sometimes it's hailing just nonstop. And eventually it just feels unsustainable when you're in that constant protection mode of your team.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a two-part question for you.
Mm-hmm.
One, how can leaders support themselves in terms of providing cover for that team so they can keep leading sustainably and not feel like they're burning out from providing that cover? But two, how can organizations kind of support these leaders who's kind of always providing that cover for their team?
So I guess to your first question, I would say I would ask the leader the question of like, are you letting it be known that I feel like I have to provide all this cover for my team, and are you communicating that with the necessary stakeholders? And what I mean by that is, what I've seen is that when it comes to leaders at organizations, I've seen that it's really hard for them to ask for exactly what they want, and it makes it that much more challenging for them to not be in protective mode as much. So the first thing that I would say is that, or the first thing that I would ask that leader is just like, are you just advocating for yourself? Like, hey, I feel like I have to protect my team, or I'm always on guard when it comes to my team. And are you communicating that with their manager or the necessary stakeholder? And just having a curious conversation about that. And I think that's where it starts to bridge into the conversation. Okay, what is the organization doing to actually protect or support this team to make sure that they have the necessary tools, resources, or that there is more clarity as far as what the organizational priorities are. So I would say for the leader themselves, the first thing, of course, is self-care, right? Making sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure you have times to recover, making sure you have times to just step back, but also making sure that you're advocating for yourself, like, hey, I'm always in protecting this team, or I feel like I'm always protecting my team. So just getting clarity on the priorities and just making a request. Is there a way this can be figured out, or is it a way that I don't have? Is there something going on that I don't know? Do you have all the necessary data as a leader to make sure that you don't have to be in protective mode, or understand why you have to be protecting your team constantly? And the second thing is, when it comes to organizational support, I would say the most important thing, even though we're in a time of uncertainty with all these different changes in technology, is that does the organization or line of business have clear priorities? If not, how can the right people get in the room to make sure that the organization it has the proper priorities to actually follow through, to make sure that everybody knows what's expected of them? So I think that protection, or a leader feeling like they need to protect their team from the noise of the organization, is usually out of unclear expectations, or just a not knowing as far as what leadership wants to do with this team or this part of the organization or the future of the team. So I think that just on the organizational side, just making sure that there's more clarity. And I know that's a lot to ask for in these times, as far as what are the KPIs, what are the OKRs that we're working towards at this time. But for the leader themselves, self-care, but also advocating for themselves and just getting curious around, like, why am I always in protection mode when it comes to the team? Is there any more data or information that you can give me so you can have a little bit more of an understanding as far as what might be going on in the organization?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It just starts with those clear expectations and making sure you're communicating.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to the leaders who, because we see this all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
you and I both do workshops and things like that, of like, hey, I'm advocating for my team. We're short staffed. The priorities are, they keep giving us higher and higher expectations, and they're not giving us the resources that we need, even though I'm advocating. What would you
Mm-hmm.
say to those who, like, they feel like maybe they've done some of that communication, but there's, time, money, and resources is the response that they get?
I I feel like the question becomes, how much of a priority is my team? And I think that's a tough conversation to have. But I think that that's the simple question. Like, all right, I'm seeing that I'm not getting the resources, the time, the attention that I need, and I'm asking for it. It becomes a question of, all right, how much of a priority is my team then? Like, what's the future of my team? That's the question that comes up for me. And then I think that leader has to start making some decisions for themselves, but also letting their team know, like, hey, here's what's going on. I think that also offering that, not full information, but a little bit more information to the team as far as like, here's what I'm hearing from up top. Here's everything that I've done. I think that having that transparent conversation with the team might be important as well. But I think the next question becomes like, is this team even a priority right now? Right. In all transparency, like, okay, like what do I need to do in order to prepare myself for this as a leader? If my team isn't a priority, then what do I do for myself? Or how can I make sure that I'm taking care of myself as a leader, but informing the team as well? So that's what I would go with that.
Yeah, and it seems like for me anyways, hearing that, it's like that's for me like the definition of true leadership, where you're
Mhm.
actually being honest and transparent with your team. So that way everyone can make the best decisions for themselves and that
Mhm.
you're a part of like a thriving team, no matter
Yeah.
what, like wherever you go, like people know that they can rely on you to have some of those strong leadership skills, even if they're tough or challenging conversations or what people may not want to hear.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's usually the hardest part of that's a hard part of leadership. Like sometimes it is a difficult conversation. Some things are just out of your control, and like you said, the transparency is going to be important for yourself as a leader, but also with your team as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to shift to a little bit of a different conversation because I know this also causes some stress for leaders. I'd love to talk about this word executive presence. So I read a statistic recently in Forbes that 71% of leaders worldwide are reporting significantly higher stress levels since stepping into their current roles. And a lot of the stress, it's not necessarily the day-to-day meetings or the hours, but it's the emotional labor of being on all day long.
Mhm.
It's that being told that they need to have this executive presence with them when they're meeting with people, when they're talking to people. Now, for me, I have very strong feelings against the word executive presence versus leadership and execution. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on executive presence and how that might affect a leader's stress or burnout.
Um, I think we kind of overcomplicate executive presence. It's made to seem like it's like this complicated math problem, and it's something that just has to be learned over time because it's just essentially presence and how you show up. And with everything that's expected of everybody today, I think that when it comes to this expectation of always being on isn't executive presence. That's just, I think that's just what we have made the definition to be. But I see executive presence as just simply like just being present with people. It's those coach like leaders that have that executive presence. It's a level of curiosity when you come into conversations. It's a level of just confidence also, like just being able to whatever that preparation is for you when it comes to a meeting, making sure you know your ritual and how you prepare for big meetings, presentations, making sure that you're building strong relationships with people. Like it's less about executive presence or just leadership in general. It's not about your output. It's about how do you cultivate relationships with the people that you work with, the cross-functional teams, your manager, your peers. How do you cultivate those relationships? It's getting to know them outside of work. I think that like curiosity is simply what we call executive presence is. Of course, there are some hard skills that come with that as far as like how to put together a deck, but you've done that before as a IC. And I think we forget, we feel like executive presence is like, oh, this is a brand new thing. It's just a level of curiosity that you have to take and just knowing that you always don't have to have the right answer or you just don't know from time to time, but you'll find out. So I think we feel that executive presence means that it's a feeling of we always have to be on, mainly because I don't know, like LinkedIn. I blame LinkedIn for this, but just just I think it's just a level of curiosity. It's just how are you getting curious about the people you manage? How are you getting curious about the people that you work with? How do you cultivate those relationships? How do you prepare? What are your daily rituals when you're preparing for a presentation? How do you put together a meeting agenda? Like it's just making sure that you're able to just show up with confidence, a little bit of poise, but it doesn't require you to always be on. If you always feel like you have to be on, I think that if you're still going by the definition of what executive presence is today, you have to have areas within the day in which you recover. So I think that recovery is so important, and you should do this even if you don't subscribe to the definition that we have today of executive presence, but just simply like getting outside during the day, getting up from your desk. I've also found that, just changing up your environment, like working out of a coffee shop, finding a co-working space is a great way just to recover and reset so you don't feel like you have to be on 24/7. But overall, I just think that we overcomplicate executive presence. It's corporate jargon for curiosity. That's it. It's corporate jargon for confidence. It's corporate jargon about how do you become prepared for something. Like it's just how do you prepare for a meeting? How do you prepare to meet with a stakeholder? Like it's just how do you communicate? It's just corporate jargon for a bunch of basic stuff that you've probably done before. You're just getting better at it because you have a different level of stakeholder that you might have to deal with. And what do you do when you don't know something? You ask questions. And that is a part of executive presence. People appreciate that. Like, how do you work? What's the best? What are your ways of working? What's the best ways that you can communicate? Those things are all relevant. What are your values as a leader? How do you lead? Like, how do you get things done? How do you lay out processes? How do you brainstorm? How do you do retros? Like, these things are all a part of executive presence. Just assume you know nothing about the person or what they do in their process. That's it. That's it. And then you say, well, this is how I work. How can we find common ground? Executive presence. That's it. So I just think that it's so over complicated today. It's like order operations. And it's like it's not that. It's not that. Not that. It's not that. It's a lot simpler than that.
Yeah, I feel like LinkedIn is ruining a lot of words for us.
What's one word? What's one word that is ruined for you?
One word. It's more of like it's ruining the language for me. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm tired of hearing about quiet quitting or like then there's other versions of quiet quitting that I can't remember. It's always like it almost seems like there's always two words of like some new jargon
Yep.
where
Quiet quitting. Yes. I remember that one. I'm just like, you
that
know,
sounds
this
like
was a thing. This was a thing before
yeah,
we gave it a label. Like it just
it's a disengaged employee.
yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, LinkedIn is rough. And I've listen, I've also been one of those. And I was just like when I write that stuff sometimes I was on that. I was doing that. I'm not perfect here. All right. I fell victim to the LinkedIn trap of like executive presence. Here's how you engineer your executive. It's like then I look back at it, I'm like, ugh, yuck, yuck. Like it's just like yuck. I just sound like everybody else. So I get it. I get it.
Yeah, I think you summed it up though. Like it's like a word for other things where instead of saying executive presence, say it like if you need to give feedback or if there's something very specific that your organization is looking for, like
Mm-hmm.
um, communications skills or
Mm-hmm.
like just being able to say what that is versus like a broad term that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
people.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And then to bring it up in performance reviews, you know, we want you to work on your executive presence. All right. What do you mean by that? Like, well, I don't know. Like, just take some courses and come back to us on executive presence.
All right, Brian, I want to talk to you a little bit about company performance.
Mhm.
So, you and I are both mindfulness-based stress reduction instructors. One of the things I actually caution organizations against in terms of doing mindfulness trainings is if they are not concerned with their company culture, if they have an environment where people are always working, 24/7, that whole hustle culture we were talking about before, that I probably wouldn't recommend mindfulness training because in my experience, when I've taught mindfulness, especially the longer courses, um, when people become very aware, when they start becoming aware of their thoughts, their emotions, their sensations, the things in their life that they do have control over, the things that they don't, a lot of times they might realize that, hey, if my work culture doesn't prioritize employee well-being, this might not be the space for me because no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to change the culture. So I'm curious, when you think about organizations that do handle stress and burnout well within their organizations, what do you think they do different at the cultural level to protect the mental health and but still maintain performance at the same time?
I think from what I see is that the leaders kind of model the necessary behaviors, and they when I say leaders, I don't just mean like mid-level managers. I mean the CEO is one to say like, hey, we're having like mental health day, like mental health month is something that's celebrated. Like there's mental health days that you can take. There may be an ERG associated with it as well. Like I think just modeling those behaviors and having those institutions within the organization to support it, that's where I've seen it work really well. Even bringing me in as a coach consultant and do mindfulness trainings, like it's just like, oh, you all care. Like it's just something that you all have spent money on. It's just that when that financial investment is there for somebody who, especially in these smaller organizations where I've seen it done the most, I think that I see it come from the director level and up when it comes to modeling the behaviors, prioritizing it, and the people that I've been able to talk to see the value in it because they also practice this themselves in outside of the organization. But overall, there's just initiatives all around, whether it's the ERG programs. They talk about the benefits programs. Maybe there's some type of partnership with a Lyra or something like that. Like there's all these different avenues that you can take. There's sabbaticals that employees can take for up to 3 months available to them, and nobody's going to bat an eye if you do. You just need to follow the proper protocol. Like all these things are in place to support the employee, and you see people in the C-suite take advantage of these things, and they talk about it during all hands, like, hey, like we have this stuff available, or hey, we're going to bring in a speaker to talk about mental health within the workplace. How do we cultivate resilience? How do we talk about stress? Like there is a ongoing conversation around it, and it's not a one-off. It's like an effort from the top to the bottom to make sure that this is advocated across the organization, and that when they take the time to present the culture assessment surveys as far as like how people are feeling, and so they just name it like, okay, we see we're stressed, or we see we're experiencing a little bit of disengagement. All right, here's what we're going to do to actually remedy that. And I was a part of remedying this disengagement of employees, but just being able to have the transparent conversation around it, and leadership in the C-suite specifically models the behaviors and talks about these things and reminds people like, we have all this stuff available to you if you need to take time to yourself, or if you need to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's so important from the C-suite, right?
Yeah.
It's such a difference if you go to a training and it's like, okay, it's just all this, middle level or individual contributors. But then when you have that executive coming in and saying, hey, this is important. We're taking time out of your day. We're paying you to attend this training, to go on this workshop, to take this sabbatical, whatever it is,
Yep.
that the messaging is from the top down.
Yep.
And not just maybe the individual contributors or the middle managers trying to support their teams.
Exactly. It's just practice what you preach. Like, that's what I see for the most part from the C-suite specifically. That's where I've seen it work really well.
Yeah. And I love that you brought in leaders, and we were talking about the C-suites and directors and above. But many organizations do have resources like EAP or coaching. Employees may not always necessarily use them. So when it comes to leaders, maybe middle managers and below, how can those managers encourage people to access some of that support to help with their stress or burnout without feeling forced?
Um, I don't know however way or any other way that I could put this. It's just again, if you see a behavior with a direct report, maybe refer them or get curious or refer them to the resource. And it's not to say you have to force them through it, but it's just to say like, hey, I see I see that you've been a little bit short lately. Your quality of work has changed up a bit. Is everything going on? How are things going, or what's going on, or not what's going on? How's everything going for you? And just that little executive presence, just that little bit of executive presence, you're able to get curious about the person, even if they don't want to open up to you about it. It's just more so referring them like, hey, I just want to remind you, like, we have all these different resources here. If you're going through something at home, or if you need help, we have all these different resources. So I think that when it comes to middle management, I think this is the epitome of being a leader, is just to say that it's not always having the answer, but just knowing the resources that are available to you and your team, and you actually partaking in those resources so you can also refer your team members to these different things. Not to say that you're making them go, but just reminding them that, hey, these things are available. I'm noticing a change in your work. I'm noticing that you might have been a little bit short with me lately. I noticed that you were silent in that last meeting. Is everything okay? And allowing the direct report to just talk through that. But also, if they don't feel comfortable talking to you, just let them know, like, hey, I'm here for you. But also, just as a reminder, we have all these different resources if you didn't know. Because what I find is that a lot of people don't know all of their benefits. A lot of people don't know everything that's available to them. So they feel like they're by themselves, or they have to deal with it on their own, or they just have to continue to show up at work, although the quality of their work might be falling, and they get defensive. And it's just like, hey, I'm here for you. Just reminding you that all of these things are here for you. And it's just not knowing all the time. And I think that's also a sign of, like, up top, if they're not advertising these services, these benefits, these products that are available to people, then it's hard for the middle manager and then the individual contributor to know that they're there too for support.
Yeah, that awareness there, that one, what are the resources that they actually have available?
Mm-hmm.
I like how you also mentioned if the manager or leader used them themselves and how helpful it was, because we know
Mm-hmm.
people are more likely to get help if it's been recommended by someone that they know.
Mm-hmm.
So really love those ideas there. Brian, if you can, as we wrap up, if you can leave leaders with one piece of advice to manage their stress and burnout, what would it be?
One piece of advice. I say this a lot because I had to learn the hard way. The most important relationship that you'll ever have is with yourself. And just what I mean by that is the way that you treat yourself will determine how you treat other people. So just understand, like, you have to always be curious in cultivating a relationship with yourself.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. Well, Brian, with that, I want to thank you so much for your time. Before we close, tell us where people can find you.
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at. I'm not talking about executive presence and the science of. No, I'm not talking about that there. But you can find me at Bryant C. Alexander Jr. On LinkedIn, and you can check out my website at www.reframecc.com.
Well, thank you so much, Bryant. This workshop was brought to you by Uplift. Our purpose is to create a world where every workplace is a thriving environment. We do this through interactive trainings, specifically with our mental health first aid course. If you'd like to learn more about how to shift your organization towards people first workplaces, where a culture of care and empathy is a core measure of your company's success, reach out to us at Uplift Learning Solutions.